Hello, and welcome to the Emotional Endurance Movement. This week's episode is dedicated to your one colleague that's always under pressure. You know the one.
I know the one.
Hello, and welcome to the Emotional Endurance Movement, the only mental health comedy game show that's brave enough to ask, how are you feeling? Really? I'm Laurie Sharp-Page, your Chief Coping Officer and host, and here with me today is our perennial contestant, our behaviorist at large, and someone who got pulled over without getting a speeding ticket. It's Crimson McDonald.
Howdy.
I want to introduce our other perennial contestant. That's you, the listener at home, the one who logs on and thinks about your mental health for a little bit, checks in, thinks about how you're feeling, how you're regulating, how you're coping, and has a lot of fun while you join us doing it. Thank you so much for joining us. The insight of the week is, I kind of feel it in my bones right now. And it actually comes from one of my least favorite existentialists, Soren Kierkegaard. Soren, do we think? Soren Kierkegaard? And it's really relevant right now. I mean, I can say what I can say about Kierkegaard, but this hits right now. This week's insight of the week comes to us from Soren Kierkegaard. The greater the external pressure, the greater the demand on the inner being. The greater the external pressure, the greater the demand on the inner being. What do you think, Crimson?
I think this is a core to part of what we're trying to do with the emotional endurance movement, in the sense that if your cups, your internal being, are not full, you cannot sustain the pressure of the world.
Yeah.
And so, like you, I hate to agree with Kierkegaard, but this is one of the ones that he got right.
This week, we uncovered that Crimson and I both have Kierkegaard baggage, which was an interesting,
Yeah,
existential wormhole to go down. And we both really agree with what he's saying here. And I feel like this is part of that lemon of the room that I try and bring to people is like, but like, we don't talk about this part, and not talking about it and not finding space for it, even if it's a total pain,
right.
like that makes it so much harder.
Well, and it all goes back to, this is obvious stuff. It doesn't take a lot to know. So the more pressure you're experiencing, the more that I don't know, it just happened.
Is it the Kierkegaard?
Yeah, it's seeing Soren's name. Excuse me. Okay. Well, this is very obvious, right? The more pressure you feel, the more demand on your inner being. But obviously, he meant it from a much more deep and intimate meaning, not the superficial stuff of like, yeah, your brain is at capacity, but also really, I think what he meant is your soul. Like, there's only so much bandwidth that you have, and when you have an external pressure on that, it does eat away at your being, your actual existence.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I mean, before his time, for sure. The neuroscience really supports this as well, because when we don't find ways to release and recover from dysregulating experiences, it really does act like a pressure cooker, And so by not finding that external release, by increasing that internal pressure, you're making it harder as you go through the pressure-filled environments that we all exist within. So ahead of his time. I really, this quote really resonated with
Me
me when
too.
we found this. Because it speaks to the psychological capital piece of this. It speaks to chronic dysregulation. It speaks to so many things. And to your point, I do think he was coming at this from more of a maybe spiritual place
Yeah.
would be
Well,
where I
he
would
was the
place it.
religious existentialist, so
Exactly. But the science really backs up what he's saying here
yeah.
from my perspective.
Mhm.
And I love that for Kierkegaard. And I guess you and me, we got the added benefit this week of working on healing our Kierkegaard trauma.
Yeah. Bonus.
A
There are good
bonus.
things. I mean, his reading was just, it was boring. I'm sorry. He was less compelling of a writer.
I think less compelling is the way to put it. It is also a little bit more, I mean, it's hard to describe any existentialist as rigid, but I would put him in the more rigid
Yeah.
category of them.
Again, religious. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So now we wanted to do a quick show and tell about times when we were under pressure, under external demands, and how that impacted our inner being. And I'm going to start because I just had one last week. Lucky ducky me. Last week, I found myself pretty under pressure when I got up at 3 a.m, got to the airport, flew across the country, got to beautiful, sunny Southern California, and found out that there was no hotel room booked for me. So I found myself in a situation where I was exhausted. I'd already been traveling for about 10 hours, even though it was still like around lunchtime because of the 3-hour time change between coming from Ohio and going to the West Coast. And I was actually really feeling myself. I was like, yeah, I got this. Life is good. I've got it all figured out. Look at me. And I kind of had a weird premonition as we were pulling up to the hotel. I kind of thought like, okay, my room's not going to be ready yet. And I'm going to be exhausted sitting in the lobby, which actually, as a sidebar, ended up being true. But let's get to that point. Because the issue was I got there and I thought they had a hotel room booked for me. They did not. And no one was able to help me. It was just kind of like, okay, well, figure it out and we'll see you tomorrow for your presentation. And so a lot of that confidence that I was really like feeling when I got off the plane, whoop. And then I moved straight into panic because this hotel was literally right next to Disneyland. And there was, in addition to Disneyland and all of that going on, there was also the National Cheerleading Competition Convention going on. So everything was sold out. Or if it wasn't sold off, it was going to cost me like a lot of money that I didn't think I'd get reimbursed. So I started to panic. And I picked up the phone and I called my support system back in Ohio. I called my husband first because I just needed to be like, oh my God, I'm such a dummy. I was just spinning out. So I called him first and he was like, well, it sounds like you got to figure this out. So then I called Crimson.
Yeah.
And I was like, we got a little something to figure out. And then we went back and forth a few times. Some point in time, I lost my jacket during the middle of this. I don't know when because I was panicked and my brain wasn't working correctly. But then we found a place that I could stay at that was going to be okay. It was just around the corner. It wasn't going to cost us everything. And I got there and then it was too early to check in. It was like 1 o'clock at that point in time. They're like, check-in's like 4. And I was like, I have nowhere else. And they were like, yeah, we get it, but like, you can't check in yet. So I sat on their couch for about 2 hours. I made content. I fell asleep a little bit. I realized I lost my jacket during that period of time. And I think the hardest part for me is I had like a big plan of like all this work I was going to get done. When I got checked in, I was going to take a shower, a little nap, and then I was going to have like 6 to 7 hours of uninterrupted, deep focus work time. And I was really pumped about it. And about 45 minutes into sitting at the couch in the lobby, I realized that that was not going to happen. I needed to adjust that expectation. And so then it became a game of like stay awake long enough just to get into your hotel room. And finally around 3 o'clock, I did. They did get me in a little bit early. I got into my room. I took the hottest freaking shower. I got into bed. I took a little bit of a nap. I got up like an hour later and I got they had on Wednesday night, they had a nice little spread. They had like some chicken sandwiches and stuff like that. So I went and I got those. And then I went back to my room and I called my husband. It was like 6:30 California time, like 9:30 at home. And I was like, I'm going to bed right now. Like, I'm not doing anything else. I'm just going to bed. Tomorrow will be a new day.
Yep.
Tomorrow I need to go, and actually today I just survived and there will be no other further work. And it actually worked out fine for me. Like, I was able to take a rest, and a really long rest. I was very well rested by the time I got on the stage at 9:30 the next morning. And my session went good. Everything went good. I survived. I had a pretty productive work day the rest of that day, so I did get some work in. If I can get through that, I can get through most anything. And I think it's really important with the travel aspect of this, like something always happens with travel. And I am really trying to get my message out, and I'm willing to go nearly anywhere. And because of that, I have to really make sure that I'm able to keep up my end of the bargain, which is to be able to perform nearly anywhere after nearly God knows what has happened to me on my way there, or is going to happen like right after. If I'm in this case, I was like then immediately like turning around and I had another event back in Ohio. So it was crazy. It was nuts, but I got through it. It was interesting while it was happening because I distinctly knew I was under pressure, a lot of pressure. And I knew that I had to adjust my expectations and I had to ask for help. Those are the two things that were clear for me. So I stayed regulated. I coped pretty well. It was exhausting. I will never not confirm my hotel ever again. Best believe that is a big learning here. But that is my show and tell for Under Pressure.
Good job, Laurie. And as someone that witnessed, it was a mess. You were like, hotels are expensive. And then I get online. It's like $800 a night. And then I click and it's sold out anyway. So even if you had $800, that was insane. But you stayed cool.
Yeah.
I think I was on the phone with you and you realized you lost your coat too. And you're like, great. And now my
coat's the real bummer
gone.
Out of all of it.
Yeah, you really liked that coat. I could tell. You're really, really bummed about that.
I was.
But you got through, Laurie.
I did. How about you?
Building your efficacy.
That's true. Yeah. And with travel, I think that's a big part of it is just having the confidence that like, okay, I can figure this out, And there would have been lots of solutions. We were lucky that we found one that was like a mile from the hotel.
Right.
That probably was the next, if we weren't able to find it, like what's the next reality. And I think the next reality was probably like having to adjust the expectation that I'd be near the hotel.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, good job, Laurie.
Thank you. How about you?
So, Laurie, first I want to comment that it's interesting that we're at the point in our relationship where your pressure is my pressure. Because if I look at the past 7 to 10 days, that was a high pressure point of being like, Laurie, it's fine. Totally fine. It's great. It's going to be fine. And then realizing there wasn't like any rooms. That's pressure. But what's funny is the story I'm bringing is also you having to deal with the consequences of my pressure, which was also a travel story. When Laurie and I coped across America, one of the things behind the scenes that our audience did not get to witness is either me vomiting in a plane or Laurie sitting next to a woman vomiting in a plane. And so let's unpack what I mean by vomiting. It got really hot in the cabin. I'm a really bad, the first premise is like, I'm a bad flyer. So I think I did a pretty good job for Laurie of trying to hold it together. But one of the things my nervous system does is like, if I try to internalize my anxiety, it just physically manifests. But I was holding it together. We're in a plane and I had bought like this specific Comfort branded hoodie and sweatsuit that's like weighted, like hot. and it starts getting warmer, and I was asleep, and I like woke up and had that feeling of like the plane dropped a little. Nothing dramatic. I mean, just like whoop whoop. And I felt my stomach hit. And I'm like, well, to our advantage, we're sitting in the emergency exit, which is where the flight attendant sits. And I'm just like, yeah, I think I'm gonna puke. Well, no one came. No one came. And then it happens in my mouth, and I had to hold it. But I can't tell Laurie what is going on because I have vomit in my mouth. So I was wearing a mask, took my mask and vomited in my mask. So then I was holding a mask of vomit, trying to communicate with Laurie, who's now trying to get help.
Mm-hmm.
And then it had happened again. And I used my little cup of Sprite that I had enjoyed previously. Then I had a cup of vomit. I can't believe this really happened, Laurie. This happened.
Oh, it happened. It's so fun going back down memory lane on this one.
So traumatized by this.
It was a tough one.
So anyhow, one hand is
the flight attendant handled it like a champ.
I mean, because I had a mask of vomit in like a grocery bag in one hand, a cup of vomit. No flight attendant came still. So then I cleared the floor and I just decided like, I'm going, just gonna happen. Then you got the flight attendant and yeah, we came out of that one. But you say it's so regulated. And you're like, it's fine. It's fine, Crimson.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, what am I gonna tell you? You got a handful of vomit. Like, wow, you really messed up big time. You're throwing at me.
You know, I didn't even think about
this is self-preservation.
I just felt so bad, and it
was fine.
The feeling of like being trapped. I mean, I've worked in politics for decades. Pressure is like common, but that kind where you're like you're physically not in control and you're trapped. It was just like every variable was against me.
Yeah,
it was just too much. No, it was just too much.
Not great.
And then having to like land at an airport covered in vomit. Oh my God.
Yeah,
that was
a bummer. That was a bummer.
So I think it's funny. Both of our pressure stories required one another to engage, to help.
It's true.
Claw us out of the disaster that we had found ourselves in. But that was one of the most epic flights of my life.
Okay, so I'm going to give you 800 points for that because I can never overstate how impressed with I am that you were able to keep the vomit in the mask and in the cup. That was really the most important part of it. And the flight attendant did have to come through with like the sawdust stuff for like a little bit.
Yeah. I kept it mostly together though.
You kept it. I mean, like it was contained.
It was as contained as anyone can contain it.
It was so 800 points, and thank you for taking me back to that memory. The hardest part of all of that, and the thing I haven't wanted to tell you until now, is like I am one of those people that like when I smell throw up, I'm immediately like, ooh. So like I was happy I was able to keep it together because there was a moment when the flight attendant finally showed up and he grabbed the bag and it kind of wafted over to me that I thought maybe don't get rid of the rest of that sawdust cleaning up product. We might need it.
Oh man, that was
there might be another route.
Well, Laurie, I'm going to give you 1,000 points because the pressure you put me under of finding a hotel room was way less severe and intense than sitting next to you while you held cups and masks of vomit.
That's true.
You know, if the business fails, Laurie, at least we always have that.
We always have that. Next up, it's time for our emotional weather report, where Crimson's going to take us through what is in the air for the emotional endurance movement. Not just the vibes, not just the guesses, but the actual responses that you all give us on our weekly survey so we can figure out how everybody's doing. This data tells us exactly what's in the emotional atmosphere right now. So what do we got, Crimson?
Thank you, Laurie. Well, this week at the emotional endurance movement, We had our community take the survey, and we are seeing our current emotional endurance inventory score at 61. So what does this mean? This means that we're functioning, but we're under pressure. So we're not in the collapse and we're not thriving. So we're kind of in that in-between state. But if we break down what's bringing us up and what's bringing us down, it's interesting because this is a total flip from last week. What we're seeing is hope and optimism is up. Maybe that sunshine is juicing us to feel like there's a better tomorrow. But unfortunately, we also are showing lower results in our efficacy and resilience. That tells me people are over having to cope. They are not feeling confident in their ability to bounce back or in their ability to deal with what's to come. But luckily, they're hopeful that they aren't going to have to deal with much. So I think this to me says burnout. So it's great to see hope and optimism coming up, but let's try to work on efficacy and resiliency. And the thing that popped most is social settings. We haven't seen this one pop on the score for showing up dysregulated. Part of me thinks we were so locked up for so long that we got back out and we're like exhausted. We're already depleted with our social energy. The other thing to note is work life is here again. And we keep seeing this. And while we would expect it because that's where we feel the most pressure, the goal of the emotional endurance movement is to start showing up regulated in the high pressure environment. So we hope over time we see this bubble get smaller because you don't want to show up dysregulated. Just because it's chronically stressful does not mean you can't show up regulated. And so hopefully we'll see less of that. If we're showing up dysregulated to work and in social settings, what are we doing to fill our cups? Because that's really how we counterbalance our lack of efficacy and our lack of resilience this week. So let's see where we're filling them up. So I added something to our survey because Laurie reminded me not too long ago that even the things we think may be unhealthy, like screen time, can be healthy coping mechanisms when they're used with intention. And I put it on the survey, and sure enough, it popped up. And if you think of the correlation, and of course, correlation does not mean causation, people are a little burned out and feeling tired and showing up dysregulated to social gatherings. They're feeling better and filling up their cups on the screen time. Exercise and time outside, we know, are extremely healthy ways to fill our cups. And so we're seeing those pop up. The weather's beautiful. People are getting back out. The sun's shining. So that makes sense, but it's I hope the screen time is popping up as a true fill up the cup. Laurie recently was exposed to my TikTok feed and saw many very uplifting things. I have pruned my TikTok to be a positive thing versus a negative thing. So if others have done the same, it can be a healthy way to veg out. So that brings us to wrapping up to our advisory. So right now we're getting more daylight. So every day from this point forward, we're going to have more sunlight. Use it. It's a good activator for our goal setting. So start using the sunshine to influence your brain to be motivated. And then I'm starting something new this week. I'm going to start a challenge of the week. And so what I'm challenging people to do this week is start replacing I should with do I choose to do this? And see if it changes where you show up and how you show up. Because a lot of times it's about intentionality. I should go to the gym is a different signal to your brain than I choose to go to the gym today. So see if that reframe helps you be a little bit more motivated and inspired and build a little bit more of that efficacy that you can do it. And that's it this week from the Emotional Endurance Movement Forecast.
I think that's such a powerful reframe between like I have to go do this versus I get to go do this. You're right. They are different signals to the brain. Speaking of the under pressure show and tell that we did earlier, I think that was a key shift that helped me stay regulated. Was I was still really grateful to be there, really excited to be able to give my presentation. Just really overwhelmed with what happened in the meantime. But having that anchor, I get to do this. This is exciting. I choose to do this. This is something good. Really helped the whole thing from being way less traumatic than it really could have been.
Well, and it avoids a toxic positivity that
Yes.
just it's not Oh, you're lucky. You're choosing to. You're in control.
Yeah.
You own that. And when we're seeing these dips in efficacy, people need to realize that they actually do have the control to make these decisions.
They sure do. Now it's time for our feeling of the week, pressure. Pressure is a strange one because most of us don't name it as a feeling. We call it a responsibility, we call it leadership, we call it adulting, we call it all sorts of different things. But pressure is, in fact, a feeling, a felt experience that lives inside our body. It's a sense that something is being asked of you, and because of it, you feel a certain type of way. That might be uncertainty, that might be anxiety, that might be fear. Pressure is really something we have to pay attention to. It is normal and natural in our life, but without internal or external support, pressure can just play out in our bodies and in our minds. And it can create this low level hum of like, I can't do this. But here's the important part. Pressure isn't automatically bad. In fact, a lot of times pressure and our relationship to it can be modified just by better understanding the pressure and being more selective about what pressure we put ourselves under. Pressure becomes dangerous most when it's invisible. When everyone assumes that you're just fine because you're functioning, but nobody really checks in to understand what's going on underneath the hood. See, pressure is a perennial in life, but our ability to cope with it is ever changing and dynamic. And this episode, more than anything, we want you to know that if you can notice your pressure, be aware of it, and work to find some ways to soothe or adapt your relationship with it, you can find a whole lot more efficacy and resilience and your ability to cope with the natural, normal pressures that we all face at different times throughout our life. And that's all from this week's Feeling of the Week, pressure. This brings us to our first mini game, Hidden Pressure in History, because one of the biggest myths we tell ourselves is that people who did great things were doing so under immense pressure. The truth is that many of the historic figures that we applaud also had additional things happening in their life that maybe aren't so well known, but made them even more resilient and their story even more impressive. Kick this one off with Crimson's Hidden Pressures in History story.
So I want to talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and not political, but her story embodies endurance under pressure. And as someone with a graduate degree in political science, I had to be honest, I did not know this story until I watched the movie about her. So highly recommend it 'cause it was just great. But so a lot of us know she was one of the few people, first women that graduated with a law degree. And she was one of the, I think there were less than 10 women in her class at Harvard in law school. But in her second year, her husband, Marty, who was also in law school, was diagnosed with testicular cancer. This was in the 50s. And the prognosis was not good. The outlook was not good. And the treatment plans were horrible. He was extremely sick. And so she buckled down. She attended all of her classes. She attended all of his classes. She took all of his notes. She did all of his homework assignments. Now, Marty was engaged. He was laying on the couch sick and doing the work, but based off of the notes she took, and she was typing his papers. So she did all of their academic studies and got him through law school. But the other kicker is they also had their first daughter at the time. So she was one of the only women in law school. She was doing law school for 2. She was managing a household. And keep in mind, 1955, 1956, there weren't daycares. There weren't support structures for this type of lifestyle. And she's caregiving, plus the anticipatory grief. He had a very small likelihood of surviving. So she was literally in a pressure cooker. And we know how this story ends, right? Like, we know that Marty ended up becoming a lawyer. She became a lawyer. And he was so instrumental in her success, and he was always lifting her. And once I learned that part of the story, it made so much sense of it wasn't necessarily maybe Marty was super progressive and a man before his times, but he owed everything to her. I mean, if he hadn't had her, he would have had to drop out of law school. If he hadn't married that woman, he wouldn't have made it through law school. He would have been nothing. And they had a wonderful, lovely life together. And it's just such a good story that's not about the toxic positivity of pushing through. It's about leaning in. And when I went back to look before I shared this story, I was like, what? Because she didn't talk about it a lot. And I think she didn't talk about it because she respected her husband so fiercely. She didn't want him to be seen as Ruth's sick husband, the person she had to care for. She didn't want that to be a part of her narrative. She was alive when they did the movie, and apparently she was extremely uncomfortable with this being in the movie because she didn't want it to be reflective of Marty. And if Marty had been alive, I don't know if she would have let them go that deep into that plot line. But when it came out and they started talking to her about how she coped with it, she said that one of the most important things is focus and the ability to compartmentalize and to know when to focus on the grief and when to avoid. I mean, what we talk about, there's times avoidance is important. And she avoided the ruminating on the future. Like, what was next? She was worried about the next assignment, the next class, the next treatment. She stayed very focused on what was next and not ruminating. And Laurie, you'd be the first to say that she was able to break that stress cycle by not
Yeah.
ruminating on the what ifs. And the other thing that I love, and this is something I heard her talk about, not in the context of coping, but I know it was one of the skills, is that her and Marty loved laughing together. That was the cute thing about them. And the picture I'm sharing is a picture of when he was battling cancer. And that's just them. You know, you can see he's in comfy clothes and PJs, but she was like having a moment and trying to be in that moment to then go write papers for both of them. And so she always said that their love was formed around being able to laugh at the challenges. And it goes back to what we say, lemons come, it's how you process them. And we also know from a neurological perspective that by laughter, it lowers our cortisol. It releases a lot of good hormones and good things that helps buffer all of the horrible things that stress brings into our life. And then the thing that resonated the most when digging into her coping skills through it is she said a lot of times that she focused on not being the martyr. And she never wanted the narrative to be, I sacrificed everything. And she always reframed it as, this is what love is.
I love that.
And it
Yeah.
just, she acknowledged the exhaustion. She acknowledged it was hard. She stayed grounded in the fact that this is life. This is love. Loving through sickness and health. And she did it. And they had a beautiful story and a remarkable life. And we think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and when you think of pressure, I think everyone would go to being one of 10 or 9 kids at Harvard getting a law degree, women at Harvard. But really, this was the stuff that she was dealing with. This was the real pressure. This was the life and death. She didn't know she'd become a Supreme Court justice. She didn't know what her story would be.
He would survive,
Right.
that they would have life beyond this. I mean, it's an incredible part of the story. It's a deeply intimate part of the story, and one I appreciate that you brought to the table today.
Yeah, I'm glad to share it because I think it's an important one.
Yeah.
It speaks to a lot of the silent labor that I don't want to say just women. Of course, she was a woman that also had a kid. But the other thing that is great about this story is if you learn about their lives, Marty ended up being a prolific cook. The other thing that I think helped them cope through their life is they were very social. And when he got sick, he would not let that part of their life die down. They would have people over at their house when he was sick. And so they just really leaned into community and love and laughter. And I just think she just didn't make it a big part of who she was, but we know that this was bigger than becoming a Supreme Court justice. Everyone knows that there's no way that the love of her life beat Testa. Like, he had no, it was like 3% chance of living. And he died in his 80s. They had a 50, 60 years after that together. So it's a beautiful story and reminds us that you don't know what's going on at home. You don't know what pressure people are under.
Yeah, that was definitely a hidden pressure.
All right, what do you got for Laurie?
This one's interesting. I came across this one. I'm interested to tell the story. So my hidden pressure in history is going to be about Harriet Tubman. Now, most of us know about Harriet Tubman. She was a hero, an abolitionist, a conductor in the Underground Railroad. She's someone who made mission after mission to free others and ultimately died as part of the suffragette movement as well. When we've talked about all the things that she's done and all the pressure that she carried just to do those things. But there's something about Harriet Tubman that you may not know. Did you know that she most likely had a traumatic brain injury? When she was an adolescent, there was a fight at a local general store. And that fight involved an adult male slave and a overseer. So someone who was basically minding the slaves, if you will. And she, as well as a couple others, fought for this man because he was being treated unfairly and inhumanely. And during this fight, the overseer grabbed a 2-pound weight and slung it at the man, but actually ended up hitting Harriet Tubman in her skull and cracking her skull. And she was left bleeding and unconscious. She wasn't given medical care for several days. She was unconscious during this time. Finally, after several days' time, they allowed her mother to come and care for her, and she remained in a coma for many months after that. And she emerged with lifelong symptoms, really bad headaches, seizures, difficulty with staying conscious. Like, she would sometimes appear to be unconscious, although she would say at later times that she was present during those times, but she was what we call catatonic, unable to move, unable to engage. So she had very serious symptoms that lasted for her entire adult life. She talked about the fact that after she was injured, she would have visions, and this connected very much to her sense of spirituality and religion at the time. Part of what she really did to save people and to free people was that she rejected the teachings of white preachers that suggested that slaves should be docile and rather promoted teachings from the Old Testament that were more about being able to stand up and persevere through hardship. And all of this became very much a part of how she viewed herself and her actions as a political tool to literally and figuratively free others. It was amazing to me to find out that she most likely had a TBI. We have no idea for sure if she had that diagnosis. I'm not trying to make that claim, but she did have a severe head injury that seems to have caused ongoing chronic symptoms and a very intense coma when it first happened. This is exactly why we wanted to do this segment, is that we've all talked about Harriet Tubman. We see the value of Harriet Tubman and what she stood for, and we see that woven into at least what I believe are the values of our country. But I would have had never thought about the fact that this could be somebody who was doing this with a traumatic brain injury.
Yeah.
With serious, chronic, ongoing health issues. And what that means in the context of all of this is it just further underscores how the pressure of feeling that way and having that injury and those symptoms did not take away from her ability to do these things. In fact, pieces of that experience further informed the motivation and the belief that she had. So I wanted to bring her to the table because it is kind of amazing what our brain can do in all of its states. But it's also important to remember that things like invisible disabilities, which people today clearly have, you can be out and about and see somebody parking in the handicap spot and wonder, what's wrong with them? You can't always see somebody's disability. And that is also true about our historical figures. is that a lot of times their disability or their challenges that they faced aren't necessarily written in the pictures or in the first round of history that we get. There's usually more human spirit, adversity, resilience that can be seen. And so I was really interested to learn this about Harriet Tubman, and she was the one that I wanted to bring to the table because, again, we know her for all these great things. And she also had this pretty big thing happening in her life, one that she made a significant amount of meaning with.
Thank you. I knew she had been injured because her face had some deformities, but I had never put together a traumatic brain injury and the possibility of such, nor did I know about the trials and tribulations that it caused after the event. It was just kind of like her face looked, the way it did because she got hit in the head with a block. But
Yeah.
interesting. Thanks for bringing that to the table, Laurie. I did not know all that.
Well, Crimson, I'm going to give you 762 points for bringing up Ruth Bader Ginsburg because I actually did not know about her husband's cancer. I will have to check it out, but I was not aware of that story. And the idea of her going to class and taking notes for him and really viewing this as love, as an act of service is it's inspiring and aspirational. So thank you for bringing that to the table.
Oh, no. And I will say the movie, even though she went through a lot, the movie brings so much joy. It is such a joy to watch. And she got to watch it before she died. And she said that the reason she loved it is because it captured the joy in her life. And I don't know, just really warm and fuzzy. All right, Laurie, I am going to give you 1,000 points because how did I not know that? Or more so, how did I know she got hit in the head and I didn't deductively think about that?
Well, I think because it's just been the last 10 years where we've started to talk about things like traumatic brain injury.
That's true.
More. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think the point you probably already had a sense that if somebody is having difficulty with their facial movements or structures, there's usually something neurological going on, right? You knew she got hit in the head. You just hadn't put together.
Yeah.
And that's just another reminder. That's why it's so good to call this stuff out. It's easy to miss the nuance. Now a word from our skill of the week. Our skill of the week this week is an expectation audit. This is one of the most effective ways to reduce pressure because pressure is rarely just about what's happening. It's the gap between what is and what you believe should be. And often there's a lot of wiggle room in that last one. Expectations organize behavior. They guide effort. They help us plan. They're important. But unexamined expectations quietly turn into pressure points. An expectation audit asks 4 simple but powerful questions. What am I expecting right now? Where did that expectation come from? Is it realistic given my current capacity and this environment? And is the expectation helping me to regulate or pushing me towards dysregulation? A lot of pressure comes from expectations we inherit from old roles, old seasons, or old versions of ourselves. And you can be capable and still over-expecting. You can be resilient and still asking too much of yourself or others. You can be strong and overdue for recalibration. An expectation audit isn't about necessarily lowering the bar out of avoidance. It's about aligning the bar with reality. What would make this sustainable? What would make this more human? And what would allow me to stay present instead of just pushing through? When expectations are adjustable, pressure becomes workable instead of overwhelming. And that's all from this week's Skill of the Week Expectations Audit. And for our final mini game, we're actually going to play Expectation Audit so you can see this in real time. We're going to do something where we're going to spin the wheel and come up with a expectation. And then Crimson and I are going to work to adjust it to what we think might be just a little bit more reflective of what is realistic, what is regulating, and what actually is something that we care about.
I should be better at managing my reactions. I should make space to process what's happening so I can be responsive instead of reactive.
Love it. Great job. All
All
right.
right, Laurie. Okay, Laurie. I should not be struggling with this.
It's human to struggle, and I'm struggling.
Just name it, right?
That's to be expected. Yeah. I mean, it is what it is on that one.
Yep.
All right. They should read the room.
I say this to my kids like every day. Read the room. Hmm. I need to understand that not everyone is going to show up with the awareness I do.
Yeah. Yeah, not everybody has that tool in their toolkit. We should all develop it, but not everybody has it.
My children need to develop it. Like if people are talking, you don't walk in and just blurt out something.
Yep.
It's becoming awkward.
Absolutely.
It's like, dude, you're bigger than a human. Like we're talking and you randomly, hey, do you know 1992 Michael Jordan? It's like, okay.
No.
Okay, Laurie. I should be able to push through today.
These shoulds. You ever hear that you're shoulding all over yourself?
No.
That's what these all are. They're just shoulds. And like I laughing because like I really struggle with like stuff like this too. Like I should just get through. And I've learned that I can push myself through, but not without like not at like no cost. Like there's a big cost to it. And sometimes you just have to do it at, whatever. But most of the time what I'm saying to myself instead is being like, "Oh, I can't expect myself just to push through today because I want to. Like I have to come up with a better plan than that." So I don't totally advantage it, but like I just don't let that blanket statement be there. I really push for like more understanding of like how and what needs to be pushed through.
Yeah.
Like what does that mean?
That's I mean, I think that's how I would approach it too, is like, what do I need to get through today?
Yeah.
And how do I
Yeah.
build a plan?
All right, Crimson. I should have figured this out by now.
Oh, this is so easy. I'll never figure it all out.
Never.
Never.
Never, ever, ever. Just done with that one.
Yeah, I mean that's that easy for me.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you on that. All right. Let's see what
It's an appropriate expectation. Here's another should. I should not need help with this.
I need so much help. And one of the reasons I need so much help is I spent so much of my life not asking for help, and I made some really gnarly decisions because of it. And now I need a lot of help because I need help.
Right.
Period.
Yep.
All right. They should do this the way I would do it.
Oh, this is another one that I have gotten comfortable with, running a lot of boards. I am so thankful that they will do it, and I am accepting of whichever way they want to.
Yes, the you do you boo management style is my preferred style too.
Absolutely.
A more professional way to say that, I've heard it described as departments of one, which I think that's the mindset.
Everyone's got to do them. I mean, and if you are going to bash my way of doing it, I just resign. I mean, like dishwasher loading. I don't know if that's hit your family yet, but Taylor's like, hey, you don't know how to load a dishwasher. I'm like, oh, I don't. You're right. I should resign from that. It was a great off ramp. All
What
right.
time is it?
You have like
12:54.
4 minutes. So
Perfect. This will be fine. All right, last one. Wow. All right, I'll give it one more spin.
okay, Laurie, your last one. They should already know what I mean.
Oh, man. I feel this a lot as a speaker.
I bet.
Like, I want to
I
walk
feel this a
into a
lot
room
as
and just
a
be like, all right, everybody's
person
on
in
your
politics.
pre-work. Yeah. Everybody's done their pre-work, so we are ready to get into it. But everybody's on different places. So what I've had to learn is that it is my job to make sure everybody knows what I mean. That's my job. The
Yeah.
expectation is that's my job. And if they don't know what I mean, then it's my job to be available to try and help them in whatever context I can.
Yeah.
So that is how I understand that. But I will, going back to an earlier episode, feeling I sometimes get resentful because I'm like, why doesn't everybody know what I mean? You know, like it's really funny. Sometimes I tell people what I do and they're like, wait, what? Wait, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Wait, what? Nervous system? Huh? And it's like, oh my gosh, like, but that's part of the reason that we do this and part of the reason why we believe this could be revolutionary. If everyone knows about it and uses these skills, it would change so much because come on, we all need this.
We do.
And me right now, because I'm getting myself amped up. Oh, okay. It's funny.
All right, good job, Laurie.
All right.
So I am going to give you a solid 1,000 points for your participation.
I'm gonna stick with 1,000 points for you too. We came, we saw the expectations, and we adjusted.
Yep.
That's all for this week's episode of the Emotional Endurance Movement. If this episode made you more aware of how often you carry pressure quietly, that awareness matters. Pressure doesn't mean you're failing. It usually just means that your demand has exceeded your capacity, and we need to find you some ways to help build that capacity. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss out on next week's episode. Fill out our survey so we get your voice in our emotional weather report. We'll see you next week. You bring the feelings, we'll bring the games. Bye.
Peace out.